My name is Diana. I'm Otuzalte. And I spend my days calculating risk and loss for a living, but nothing prepared me for the moment my own husband paid $35. 000 to make me disappear. I was standing at the airline counter checking in for a 1-week business trip to Europe when my neighbor called with a voice so tight it barely sounded human. Don't turn off your phone. Pull up your home security cameras right now. I stepped out of line and watched the live feed from my living room load in real time. Victor, grinning, as he pulled another woman onto our sofa and poured her a glass of my wine. Then I turned the volume to maximum, pressed the phone against my ear, and heard him say the words that froze my blood. The wire transfer cleared this morning. The professionals in Europe are on standby. By the time her flight lands, everything will be set for her permanent disappearance. He wasn't just cheating on me. He had just paid to have me erased, and he had absolutely no idea I was watching his confession from the airport, or that I was about to cancel that ticket and turn his perfect crime into the worst mistake of his life. I was standing at the airline counter with my passport in one hand and a business-class boarding pass in the other when my phone buzzed with Brenda's name on the screen. It was 8:04 a.m. I had 2 hours until my flight to Europe, and I was already mentally running through the spreadsheets for the week of meetings ahead. I'm Diana, a 6-year-old financial analyst. Risk calculations are my entire job. I tell clients exactly how much they could lose, how to hedge against it, what the worst-case scenario looks like. The cruel irony is that I had no idea my own life was about to become the biggest liability I'd ever ignored. I answered the call with a smile, expecting a cheerful goodbye. Instead, Brenda's voice sliced through the airport noise like a blade. Don't turn off your phone. Pull up your home security cameras right now. Brenda, what's wrong? I stepped out of the check-in line, letting a stranger cut ahead. Just look. Do it now. Her words were clipped. Breathless. This wasn't the neighbor who brings me zucchini bread and laughs too loudly at my garden jokes. This was a woman barely holding herself together. I unlocked my phone and opened the home security app, my fingers moving on autopilot, while my mind raced through possible disasters: a leak, a broken window, a fire. I tapped the living room camera. The feed loaded in real time, and there was Victor, my husband of 8 years. Sitting on our cream-colored sofa, the one we argued over for a week because he wanted leather and I wanted something our dog wouldn't destroy. He was pulling another woman into a deep, unhurried kiss. She wasn't leaning away. She was leaning in, one hand tangled in his hair, like she'd done it 1,000 times. I stopped breathing. The terminal noise: rolling suitcases, chattering families. Boarding announcements faded into a dull hum. All I could hear was the thud of my own heart. But the worst part wasn't the kiss. It was the bottle of wine on the coffee table. My favorite Cabernet. The one I'd been saving for our 10th anniversary. He was pouring it for her, grinning like a man with nothing to hide. I turned the volume to maximum and pressed the phone hard against my ear, desperate to understand who she was. That's when I heard Victor's voice. Smooth and casual. The wire transfer cleared this morning. $35,000. The professionals in Europe are on standby. By the time her flight lands, everything will be set for her permanent disappearance. She is never coming back. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I stood frozen in the middle of the airport, surrounded by strangers heading off to vacations and business trips. And my entire world collapsed into a single, horrible truth. He wasn't cheating. He was cleaning up. I wasn't a wife to him anymore. I was a liability about to be liquidated. My passport slid from my hand and hit the tile with a soft slap. I didn't even notice. All I could see was the screen: Victor clinking glasses with her, toasting their future together. My future, erased with a wire transfer and a scheduled flight I was still holding in my other hand. The feed loaded in crisp, high definition. And suddenly my living room was filling the screen. My sofa, my coffee table, my curtains catching the morning light. And there, right in the center of it all, sat my husband. Victor had another woman pulled into a deep, comfortable kiss, his hand cradling the back of her head like he'd done it 1,000 times. Not a stolen moment, not a nervous gesture. This was the kiss of a man completely at home in the act. His shoulders relaxed, his body leaning toward her with practiced ease. When she finally pulled back, I got my first real look at her. She was beautiful, in that polished, effortless way. But it wasn't her face that cut me. It was her ease. She sank into the cushions like she'd sat there for years. She crossed her legs and reached over to the wine cabinet without even looking, helping herself to a bottle and 2 glasses like she was the lady of the house and I was the one who'd wandered into the wrong room. She knew where the good glasses lived, knew which drawer held the corkscrew. I knew which shelf held a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. She poured. She sipped. She laughed at something. Victor murmured every small gesture, radiating a sense of belonging that made my stomach turn, and that's when the sharp sting hit me. Not the dramatic, movie-style heartbreak. Something worse. Something cold and precise. I was watching my husband in my own space, the space where I cooked him dinners, where we'd fallen asleep together, where I'd hung the curtains and picked the throw pillows and planted the herbs on the windowsill. Every brick of our life together was in that frame, and he was desecrating all of it. One easy gesture at a time. The woman didn't belong there, but she acted like she did. And he looked at her like she deserved to. I remember thinking, this is a stranger in my home. And then the sharper thought, no. He's the stranger. He's the one who changed the rules without telling me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood frozen in that noisy airport, gripping the phone, while 2 people toasted each other on the screen with the wine I'd chosen. I realized I wasn't looking at my marriage anymore. I was looking at the aftermath of a marriage someone else was already disassembling, piece by piece. In my own living room, Victor laughed that warm, familiar laugh from 1,000 shared dinners, and something in me snapped from shock into clarity. I had to hear them. I had to know who this woman was and what they were planning in my house. I cranked the volume until the audio feed filled my ear. And the next words Victor spoke turned my blood to ice. Victor was grinning as he poured them both a second glass of wine, the amber liquid catching the morning light through my living room windows. He raised his glass to the woman who had been kissing my husband, and she raised hers back. That polished smile never leaving her face. The wire transfer cleared this morning, he said smoothly, his voice carrying through the speaker with terrifying clarity. I pressed the phone so hard against my ear that the plastic bit into my skin. $35,000. The professionals in Europe are on standby. I remember the exact sound of the ice cubes clinking in his glass. I remember the way he said professionals like he was ordering a plumber, like he was discussing a routine business expense. I was still trying to process that when he delivered the final blow. By the time her flight lands, he said, and I heard the smile in his voice, everything will be set for her permanent disappearance. She is never coming back. The world went very quiet. The airport noise, the announcements, the rolling suitcases, the distant chatter, all of it faded into a dull hum. Like I had suddenly gone underwater. My blood ran completely cold. Not the sharp, hot sting of betrayal I'd felt moments earlier when I watched them kiss. This was different. This was the deep, paralyzing chill of realizing I was watching my own death being arranged in real time. He wasn't just cheating on me. He had paid $35,000 to have me erased. Not divorced. Not left. Erased. He didn't want a settlement or a legal battle. He wanted me to become a missing persons file. A tragic footnote. A story his friends would whisper about at his second wedding. And he had the audacity to smile while he did it, to pour expensive wine in the home we'd built together and toast to my disappearance like it was a business milestone. Every other emotion, the hurt, the rage, The disbelief was swallowed instantly by something far more sinister. This wasn't the aftermath of a crumbling marriage. This was a murder conspiracy. And I was the target. The woman laughed lightly. A practiced, polished sound. And touched his arm. And the insurance, she asked? Her tone as casual as if she were asking about the weather. Victor leaned back, completely at ease. It's handled. The paperwork is in place. All she has to do is get on that plane. I looked down at my own hands. My boarding pass was still clutched in my left fingers. Business class. One way to Europe, a ticket my husband had probably helped me choose. A ticket he was counting on to deliver me directly into the hands of people who would make sure I never came home. But then the coldness in my veins shifted into something sharper, something clearer. The fear was still there. But beneath it, a different emotion crystallized the same icy, calculating clarity I used when I studied a spreadsheet full of losses and found the single error that explained everything. He had no idea I was watching. He had no idea I could hear every word. He had no idea he was toasting in a house wired with security cameras I paid for. Cameras I installed. Cameras he had helped me pick out. Victor thought he was holding all the cards. But I was the one holding the evidence. And I was about to make sure he never saw me coming. I didn't go back to that check-in line. I didn't glance at the ticketing agent, still holding my receipt midair. I just turned, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and walked. My heels clicked against the polished terminal floor. But I didn't hear them. All I could hear was Victor's voice in my ear. Everything will be set for her permanent disappearance. She is never coming back. I found a secluded corner near the main terminal exit, half hidden behind a row of empty charging stations. I set my suitcase upright between my legs so I could use both hands. My fingers were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From focus, I opened the airline application on my phone. The boarding pass filled the screen. Business class. One way to Europe. That ticket was the single most dangerous object in my life right now. It was the trap he had built around me. And I was about to spring it. 3 taps. That's all it took. First, tap the trip details. Second, tap the cancel button. Third, tap the confirmation. The red text flashed across the screen, flight canceled. Refund will be issued to the original payment method. Less than a minute. 1 minute to disconnect my life from their plan. The confirmation email hit my inbox with a soft chime. I stared at the timestamp. 8:07 a.m. 5 seconds later, my phone vibrated in my hand. Victor. His name flashed across the display. And my heart slammed against my ribs. He was calling me right now, probably standing in my kitchen, smiling at that woman, watching the clock, making sure I was where he wanted me. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I watched his name pulse on the screen until it stopped. The voicemail icon appeared. He'd leave a message, something sweet. Something like, "Just checking in. Honey, have a safe flight." I let that thought curdle in my stomach. Then I swiped down, opened my settings, and switched the device to airplane mode. The screen went gray. The bars disappeared. No calls in. No location pings. No signal that could give me away. As far as Victor knew, I was walking down the jet bridge right now, boarding a plane that would deliver me into the hands of the professionals he'd paid $35. Zero to erase me. He needed to believe that, so I gave him that belief. I slid the phone into my pocket and pulled up my suitcase handle. My reflection stared back at me from the terminal glass, a woman in a gray business suit. Hair pulled back. Face undriadable. I looked exactly like the person Victor thought he was sending to Europe. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was someone he had never met. And I was about to become the worst mistake he ever made. I pushed through the terminal doors and the airport noise fell away, replaced by the roar of planes overhead and that sharp, oily smell of jet fuel hanging in the morning air. I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. 43 minutes had passed since Brenda's call. 43 minutes since my life split into before and after. I walked straight past the designated rideshare pickup zone. Those bright green signs were screaming at me from every angle, rows of idling cars. Drivers holding up tablets with passenger names. One tap on a rideshare app would have pinged my location, my destination, my payment method. All of it tied to my digital identity. Victor might not have been tracing my phone yet. But I wasn't going to hand him a map on a silver platter. Instead, I kept walking toward the far end of the curb. A traditional city taxi sat there. The old school kind with a dented fender and a faded medallion sticker on the window. No app. No digital dispatch. Just a driver and a meter and a wallet full of cash. Perfect. I opened the rear door, tossed my suitcase across the cracked vinyl seat, and climbed in after it. Northern suburbs, I said. And I need to think. No stops. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His face was weathered. Unriadable. I pulled a $100 bill from my wallet crisp. The kind you save for emergencies, and handed it over the seat. He took it, folded it once, slipped it into his shirt pocket without a word. No receipt. No card. No record. Then he pulled away from the curb. I watched the airport shrink in the side mirror. Terminal after terminal sliding past. Then the runways. Then the long stretch of highway carrying me in the exact opposite direction of every expectation Victor had built around me. The silence in that cab was almost total. The driver didn't turn on the radio. Didn't ask where I'd flown in from. Didn't ask why a woman in a gray business suit was heading to the northern suburbs with nothing but a carry-on suitcase and a face like stone. I liked him for that. For nearly 50 minutes. We drove. I counted the exit signs as they blurred past, not because I recognized any of them, but because counting gave my hands something to do while my brain raced. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I only knew what I needed: 4 walls, a locked door, and no digital footprint. Somewhere Victor could never trace. Somewhere I could think. The city thinned out. Office parks gave way to warehouses. Then to industrial lots, with chain-link fences and trucks backed into loading bays. And then I saw it an old motel. Unremarkable. Faded sign with a missing letter. A parking lot mostly empty. Sitting across the road from an industrial park with corrugated steel walls. Pull over here, I said. The driver flicked his indicator and coasted into the lot. Gravel crunched under the tires. I checked my watch. 9:30 a.m. I paid the remaining fare in cash, no card. Nothing that existed in any system. I stepped out, grabbed my suitcase, and watched the cab disappear around the corner. For the first time since Brenda's call, I was completely alone. The motel lobby was aggressively ordinary, a worn Formica counter, a fluorescent light buzzing overhead, a rack of faded brochures no one had touched in years. The clerk looked up from his newspaper when my suitcase wheels stopped in front of him. He didn't ask where I'd come from. He didn't ask why I was alone. He just waited. A standard room. 7 nights. His fingers hovered over the ancient computer keyboard. I'll need a credit card for incidentals. No credit card, I said. I'll pay cash. All of it. Up front? He studied me for a long moment, the kind of look a man gives when he's deciding whether to ask questions or just take the money. He took the money. I counted the bills out of my wallet. Crisp, physical currency that left no trace in any system. No card. No name attached to the reservation. Just a stack of paper and a brass key sliding across the counter. Room 214. Ice machines by the stairs. Room 214 smelled like bleach and stale coffee. Beige bedspread. Beige curtains. A window facing the parking lot and the corrugated steel walls of the industrial park beyond. It was the most anonymous room I'd ever stood in. and I've never been so grateful for anonymity in my life. I threw the deadbolt, slid the chain, pulled the curtains closed. Then I stood in the middle of that beige silence, holding my phone like it might detonate. First, location services. I disabled every toggle, the app permissions, the background refresh, the precise location function. Anything tied to my GPS went dark. If Victor thought to pull up the family tracking app, he'd see nothing. A dead zone. A ghost. Second, the VPN. I activated a virtual private network, routing my traffic through a server, scrambling my digital signature into something no one could follow. I sat on the edge of the bed. 9:52 a.m. The plane I was supposed to be on was still sitting on the tarmac, and my husband was probably still on my sofa, pouring another glass of my wine, telling Carmen the plan was falling into place. He thought he was erasing me. But right now, I was the one who didn't exist. No credit card, no rideshare app, no location data, no trace of Diana anywhere in the system. I had done exactly what he planned to do to me. I made myself disappear. I did it in less than an hour. And he had no idea I wasn't on that flight, officially off the grid. And the only person who knew where I was me. I sat on the edge of that sagging motel mattress for a long moment, the silence pressing in from every side. The room smelled like bleach and old cigarette smoke. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the industrial road. 9:52 a.m. turned into 10:04 a.m. while I stared at my phone screen, thinking about Brenda. She was the one who had called me at the airport. She was the one who had heard something, seen something, felt something wrong enough to warn me. She was the only person in the world who knew I was still alive, and that made her the most dangerous person in this entire equation. If Victor figured out that Brenda tipped me off, she'd become a loose end, and I knew exactly what he was willing to pay to tie off loose ends. I activated the secure application, the encrypted one that rerouted my signal through multiple servers. I dialed Brenda's number and held my breath. She answered on the very first ring. "Hello." Her voice came through rapid and heavy, each breath sharp against the microphone. "Diana, is that you?" "It's me," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I'm safe. I'm firmly on the ground." The exhale that followed was so shaky I could hear her hands trembling against the phone. "Oh, thank God. I've been losing my mind. I couldn't tell anyone I didn't know. I thought about calling the police. But you didn't say, 'Brenda, listen to me.'" She went quiet. I closed my eyes and let the words settle before I spoke them. "You must not tell anyone we spoke today. Not the police. Not your sister. Not your closest friend. No one." I paused. "If Victor asks about me, you act completely oblivious." She hesitated. "Oblivious. You saw nothing. You heard nothing. You don't know anything about my flight. If he asks whether I ever mentioned you, you say no. You are just a neighbor. Do not confront him. Do not show any suspicion. Do not even look at him differently." "But I don't understand." "That's exactly what I need you to do. Don't understand. Don't ask questions. If you change even one expression around him, he'll notice. I need you to be so unremarkable that he forgets you exist entirely." I swallowed hard. There are people involved in this. Dangerous people. He's not the only one. The silence stretched for 5 full seconds. "Okay," she whispered. It was barely a sound. "Okay. Thank you. Brenda, you saved my life today. I mean that. I'll never forget what you did. I want you to come home safe." Her voice cracked. I couldn't promise her that. Not yet. So I said the only thing I could. "I will." And then I ended the call. I sat there, staring at the frozen screen, feeling the weight of that severed connection. Brenda was securely removed from the situation. I had protected her the only way I could by making sure she had nothing left to hide. Her safety now depended on her ignorance. And my safety depended on staying invisible. One person was gone from the equation. That meant the next call had to go to the only man in the world I could still trust. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Arthur's name. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since he helped me structure a trust fund after my father passed. But I knew exactly who he was, an aggressive attorney specializing in complex financial fraud and corporate criminal defense. The kind of lawyer you don't call for a parking ticket, the kind you call when your life depends on outmaneuvering someone who has already planned your death. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Arthur, a woman is on your screen." I said, "I'm going to talk. You're going to listen. Don't interrupt me." Silence. I took that as agreement. I laid it out in under 2 minutes. The security camera footage, the audio recording of Victor discussing the wire transfer, the exact words he used, $35,000. Professionals in Europe are on standby. Permanent disappearance. I told him where I was hiding and how I'd gotten there, the canceled ticket. The cash trail. The motel. I did not mention Brenda. I did not mention the other woman. I kept it purely factual. Purely legal. The same way I'd present a risk assessment to a client facing catastrophic exposure. When I finished, Arthur was completely silent. For a moment I thought the call had dropped. But then I heard his shallow breath, the sound of a man processing the gravity of what he just heard. "You're absolutely certain of what you saw and heard," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. 100%. "Stay in that room," he ordered. "Do not leave. Do not contact Victor. Do not contact anyone. No friends. No family. You shut your mouth and you keep it shut. Do you understand?" "Yes. I'm sending someone to you. A private investigator, the only one I trust with this kind of situation. His name is Leon. He'll be there within the hour. You open the door for him and no one else." "Understood." He hung up without a goodbye. No pleasantries. No reassurance. Just cold, precise instructions. And that was exactly what I needed. The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat on the edge of that bed, staring at the door, replaying every second of that living room footage in my head. The sound of Victor's laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the word disappearance looping on repeat, like a broken record. I wanted to call him. I wanted to scream at him. Demand answers. Make him explain how the man I'd married could sign away my life for $35,000. But I didn't, because I knew with the same cold clarity that had carried me through the airport that any contact would tip him off. And the moment he knew I was alive, the moment he knew his plan had failed, he would run. He would destroy the evidence. He would vanish with Carmen and that money and every shred of proof I needed to bury him. So I stayed. I waited. I stared at the peeling wallpaper and counted the cracks in the ceiling until I heard it. Knock. 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 Firm. Measured. Deliberate. I looked through the peephole. A man in a dark jacket stood in the dim hallway, holding a reinforced briefcase. He looked up at the camera with calm, assessing eyes. "Leon," he said quietly. "Arthur sent me." I opened the door. Leon stepped inside and closed the door behind him without a word. He wasn't what I expected, compact. Quiet. With the still, watchful calm of a man who'd spent years reading rooms for exits and threats. He carried the reinforced briefcase like it held something precious. And when he set it on the small desk by the window, I heard the weight of it thud against the wood. The latches clicked open in sequence. Inside a secure laptop with a matte black finish, and multiple external drives wrapped in anti-static sleeves. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer comfort. That was fine. Comfort wasn't going to save my life. Evidence was. Leon pulled out his phone. Tap twice. And set it on the desk. Arthur's voice filled the room through the secure conference line. Grainy, but unmistakable. Diana. You're safe. Leon. I need you to draft a preservation letter right now. We can't afford a single hour of delay. Leon already had the laptop open. Directed to the home security provider's legal department. Directly. Binding. Effective immediately. I watched him type. His fingers sure and fast. This part I understood better than anyone because I spent my life calculating risk, and I knew the first rule of any investigation: evidence only matters if it survives. A video means nothing if it can be overwritten. A log means nothing if someone can claim a system glitch. Victor had planned my disappearance like he thought he'd covered every angle, but he'd never considered that the woman he was erasing might know exactly how to freeze the records that would destroy him. The preservation letter took 4 minutes to draft. Leon read it aloud for the record precise. Un emocional. Legally ironclad. It compelled the home security provider to freeze all data servers and logs associated with my residential account. Effective immediately. Then he hit send. The confirmation came back in seconds. Time-stamped. Encrypted. Legally binding. From that instant, every frame of video my cameras had recorded was untouchable. Every audio snippet. Every metadata file. If Victor tried to call the company and claim a malfunction, he'd be lying to a corporation, already under a legal hold. If he tried to purge the records from the company's side, he'd be violating a binding directive with immediate consequences. The evidence wasn't just collected, it was secured. Have you ever had to watch someone you loved build a trap around you and realize your only escape was to be smarter? Colder. And more precise than they ever believed you could be. Done. Leon said, turning the screen toward me. He can't touch it from his side. Nobody can. I stared at those words, legal hold placed on all records, and for the first time since I'd seen Victor's face on that living room feed, I felt solid ground beneath my feet again. He had spent weeks planning my death. He'd paid $35,000 to have me erased, but he forgot one thing. I calculate risk for a living, and the risk he never saw coming was the woman who knew that once you control the evidence, you control the ending. By 11:04 p.m. Leon had the secure laptop open on that motel desk, the screen glow washing over his face. He plugged in one of the external drives and typed a string of commands so fast it blurred. "I'm in," he said. And when he turned the screen toward me, the master cloud interface was open under my administrative credentials, the same ones Victor never knew I had. The system was asking for permission to generate a standard download package. Instead of clicking export, Leon bypassed the standard options entirely. He pulled raw video files directly from the server side, isolated audio tracks as separate high-resolution sound files, and extracted every piece of metadata associated with those feeds' file creation times, device fingerprints, frame-level timestamps for the exact time span of Victor's confession. He ran a hash verification against the original files. Then he cloned everything onto 2 separate encrypted solid-state drives. The entire extraction took less than 20 minutes. Chain of custody is clean, Leon said, handing me one of the drives. You hold this one. I'll keep the other. Then he reached into the camera system's admin settings and built a new 2-factor authentication protocol tied to a device only he controlled. Victor's login was dead. He'd look at the app on his phone and see only an authentication error if he even noticed before we were ready. The next morning I woke up in that motel room with the taste of bad coffee and adrenaline. I booted up my primary laptop. Inside our shared cloud ecosystem, the one Victor and I used for household management, my account still held administrative access to all synced backups from the desktop computer in Mystic. I went straight to our joint banking portal. The dashboard showed a comfortable balance. All green and normal. I didn't trust it. I scrolled to settings, selected download raw transaction logs, and pulled every transaction from the previous 8 months. Leon watched as I imported the data into a spreadsheet and applied a filtering algorithm, the same one I use for money laundering risk assessments at work. Just in my bedroom slippers, the pattern emerged instantly. Dozens of wire transfers to external accounts with no identifiable recipient, all routed through one intermediary. Each transfer was for amounts like $9. 980 9美元970 9美元 995 just under the $10. 000 reporting threshold. Coupled with those were consecutive high-limit ATM cash withdrawals. Almost daily. From branches scattered across different counties. The withdrawals were timed to follow the wire transfers. I highlighted the outgoing columns and watched the sum total tick up and up until it stopped at an exact figure. 250美元 Ling ling ling. $250,000 gone from our shared reserves. He sat back. Leon let out a low whistle. He kept every single transaction just under the federal reporting limit. The bank's automatic fraud detection never even blinked. I stared at the numbers. Victor had drained our accounts with surgical precision. One careful slice at a time. He thought he was untouchable. He thought nobody would ever look this deep. He forgot I stare at spreadsheets all day. I see patterns in numbers the way other people hear melodies. I closed the spreadsheet and rubbed my eyes. 250美元 000 was gone. But numbers only told half the story. The money was the why. I needed the how. Leon had already pivoted to the next screen. Browser data. He tapped into the shared cloud ecosystem. Victor used a single Google account for all his daily browsing, the same one that mirrored history. Bookmarks. And sync tabs across every device we'd ever logged into. He probably thought it was harmless. He never realized our old desktop, still registered in the Mystic study, was logged into that account. And I had the password. Leon ran a synchronization script and pulled the cloud history directly onto his encrypted drive. Then he ran a keyword extraction program to flag suspicious legal and financial terms. Results came back in seconds. For the past 4 weeks, starting exactly 11 days before he booked my Europe ticket, Victor had been building a manual for my death. He'd searched Connecticut inheritance laws dozens of times. He'd looked up mandatory waiting period to declare spouse legally dead in absentia. He read how long a missing person must be gone before a court presumes death. He searched legal procedures for liquidating real estate when co-owner goes missing overseas and how to claim life insurance payout without physical death certificate. I scrolled through the autofill suggestions his own account served back. How to inherit house without probate. How to avoid suspicion when spouse disappears abroad. He wasn't just searching for comfort. These weren't idle curiosity. The man was building a step-by-step legal strategy, an inheritance roadmap built on my corpse. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. But they didn't fall. Instead, I pulled up the exact statutes he'd been reading so Arthur could see the premeditation. Leon looked across the desk. He's not just planning a murder. He's planning the paperwork. I nodded. My voice came out steadier than I felt. 4 weeks. He'd been researching this for 4 weeks before he even booked the flight. We sat in silence. The motel's fluorescent light buzzed overhead. My husband, the man who'd held my face at our wedding, had searched dozens of queries about how to turn me into a missing person statistic. Have you ever had to sit there and watch someone you trusted build the case for your own disappearance in cold? Dry search queries. The most chilling part was the precision. He wasn't skimming generic articles. He was downloading court forms, checking statutory deadlines, comparing probate timelines. The queries got darker as they got older. In the first week, it was how to find missing person abandoned property laws. By the 3rd week, it was what happens to joint bank accounts if spouse presumed dead. By the 4th week, he had moved on to how to liquidate real estate when co-owner is missing overseas, the one that would apply to the Mystic Harbor house. I stared at liquidate glowing on the screen. 4 weeks of research. 28 days of quietly planning my legal annihilation. All through a shared account he never thought to log out of. Leon closed the browser history. He's not searching for a way out. He's searching for a way in. Leon didn't close the laptop. He just opened a new window. Outlook, he said, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. Victor used an email client synced directly to our home network, the same one that fed the desktop we shared in the Mystic study. Any email that ever touched that account left a shadow somewhere. Leon bypassed the active inbox entirely. He went straight for the deleted items directory, then ran a recovery protocol on the local cache. Digging through the wreckage of files, Victor thought he'd erased with a single click. It took him 40 minutes. Buried beneath layers of promotional newsletters and expired retail receipts, the kind of digital garbage everyone forgets to purge, he found a heavily compressed file attachment. It had been sent 3 weeks ago from an address I didn't recognize. No message body. Just the attachment and a subject line that read "Only projections." Leon extracted it, decompressed the archive, and opened the document. I remember the exact moment the PDF loaded. The first page was a standard header, "Power of attorney durable and immediate." I started reading the legal text, and my stomach turned to ice. The document granted Victor absolute control over my medical decisions. It gave him authority over my individual retirement accounts. And it named him as the sole authority to sell the Mystic property, the house my father left me. The one Victor had never once contributed $1 toward. Everything that was mine. Reduced to his signature. But the worst part was the second page. I scrolled down to the execution line. There it was, my signature. Perfectly placed on the ink line. Fully executed. Stamped by a notary public. The seal was clear. The date was 5 days before I'd left for the airport. And the notary's name was someone I had never met in my entire life. I zoomed in on my own name. The strokes were familiar, too familiar. The way my D tilted. The way I looped the tail of my A without lifting the pen. I held my breath and stared at it until my eyes burned. It was a highly accurate forgery, traced directly from my previous tax returns. Victor had a copy of every document I'd ever signed for our joint finances. He had years of my handwriting sitting in his file cabinet. And he'd used it to build a legal weapon pointed at my throat. I looked up at Leon. My hands were shaking. He forged my signature. Leon nodded slowly. He's not just planning to kill you. He's planning to own everything you leave behind before the body's even cold. That was the moment I understood the full scale of what I was fighting. This wasn't a man who'd made a reckless mistake. This was a man methodically building a paper fortress, a power of attorney, a forged medical record, a trail of research so that when I vanished, he wouldn't even have to wait for a death certificate. He'd just step into my life like I'd never existed. But the power of attorney was only half of it. The same recovered email thread contained a second compressed file. And when Leon opened it, the motel room went absolutely silent. A full medical dossier? Under my name. Not a single forged document, an entire manufactured psychiatric history. Clinical notes typed on official letterhead. Signed by a physician I had never met. The dates corresponded to real appointments. I had kept my annual physical, my dental cleaning. The blood work from March. Victor had taken the skeleton of my real life and built a fictional illness around it. I remember the moment my stomach turned. One note described me as tearful and withdrawn. Reporting increased anxiety. Difficulty concentrating. And episodes of acute distress. Another recommended increasing my dosage of a heavy antidepressant. The pharmacy receipts a dozen stamps from a local pharmacy. All under my name. Billed over the past 18 months for antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. I had never taken a single pill, but Victor didn't need me to have taken them. He needed the paper trail to exist. That was the whole point. I understood his logic the second I saw it. And the coldness of it stole my breath. When a person goes missing in a foreign country, international authorities don't shrug and move on. They investigate. They examined the victim's state of mind, their psychological history, their risk factors. Victor was handing them a ready-made answer, a documented history of severe depression, high stress, erratic behavior, the perfect profile of a woman who might wander off on her own or end her life overseas, suicide, or voluntary flight. Either way, the investigation closes itself. Either way, the grieving husband gets the sympathy and the insurance payout, and the house, and everything else he had already planned to take. I sat on the edge of that motel bed, holding page after page of my own fabricated mental breakdown. The $35,000 wire transfer was the crime. This dossier was the cover-up engineered in advance, built to make my death look like my own fault before I was even dead. Leon watched me from across the desk. He's not leaving anything to chance. No, he wasn't. Have you ever had to sit and read a lie about yourself so thorough, so meticulous, that you almost believed it yourself? That's exactly what that night felt like. I flipped back to the first page. My name, my date of birth, a stranger's description of my mind. Victor's voice echoed in my head again. From the sofa, everything will be set. This was the everything. By the time I closed the file, something inside me had shifted. Fear was gone. Victor wasn't just building a legal fortress around my disappearance. He was building a gravestone with my name on it, and he expected the world to read suicide when it looked at where I'd been buried. If he was willing to fake my mental illness to get away with my murder, then I would make sure every single page of that forged dossier ended up in front of a federal judge. Every last page. Leon closed the email client with a quiet click and swiveled the monitor back toward the high-definition footage from the first night. The living room feed had been sitting there the whole time, hours of our shared home, frozen and waiting. He pulled up the timeline and scrolled, frame by frame, until he reached the exact moment the woman on my sofa turned her face toward the living room window to check the driveway. It lasted maybe a second. That turn. But it was enough. Here, he said, and clicked. He cropped her face, isolating it from the morning light bleeding through the curtains. Then he zoomed in on her features and started sharpening the pixel resolution, adjusting the contrast, running a filter that pulled detail out of the shadows. What had been a blur of a face became a portrait. High cheekbones, dark eyes, the kind of face you'd trust. The kind of face that was helping my husband plan my murder. Leon didn't tell me what he was doing. He just opened another program on the secure laptop. This is a proprietary facial recognition database, he said, used by private investigators. It didn't work like the police scanners you see on TV. No. This thing cross-referenced everything: public property records, social media registries, background check aggregates, marriage certificates, bankruptcy filings, old driver's license photos, mugshots. If a face had ever touched the system remembered it. He uploaded the optimized image and set the search parameters to run across all available databases. Then he leaned back, arms crossed, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. I stared at it too. 15 minutes. That's how long it took for the system to ping with a confirmed match. The screen flashed green, and a summary report populated in front of us. Leon pointed at the name. The woman operating under this identity is Carmen. The woman sitting on my sofa, drinking my wine, laughing with my husband while he discussed a $35. Wire transfer Carmen. The name meant nothing to me. It was just a shell. A mask. A label attached to a face I had never seen before in my life. But it was a place to start. A thread to pull. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed and read the initial background notes on the screen. Property records. A registry listing. A series of small, ordinary details that added up to a person. the first real crack in the facade Victor had built around my death. The following afternoon, Leon walked into the motel room and set a thick sealed dossier on the desk. No flourish. No dramatic pause. Just the dull thud of a manila folder landing on cheap laminate, and the weight of it felt like a bomb. I stayed up all night. He said, pulling back the cover. You need to see this before we go any further. The first thing he laid out was a federal rap sheet. The woman I knew as Carmen had been arrested twice under that name, and both arrests were dismissed. Not because she was innocent, because the witnesses vanished. The victims recanted under pressure, and the charges collapsed before trial. Then came the banking alerts. Accounts flagged across 3 different states, each one following the same eerie rhythm, a rapid influx of cash, a flurry of transfers, then a clean sweep that left nothing but dust. And finally, the expired driver's licenses. 4 of them. 4 separate jurisdictions. In the photo on the oldest one, the hair was shorter, the face younger, but the eyes were the same. Those dark, trusting eyes that had been looking up at my husband from my sofa. Carmen doesn't exist. I said. It wasn't a question. Carmen is a name she uses. Leon said quietly. She's operated under this alias for the past 18 months. Before that, she was somebody else. And before that, somebody else again. I've counted 4 distinct identities over the last 7 years. The paper trail connects all of them to the same face. He tapped the dossier. She's a ghost. Diana. A professional ghost. I flipped through the pages. Each identity came with its own story. Its own wardrobe. Its own carefully constructed life. And each one followed the exact same pattern. She targeted wealthy married men. She studied them, mirrored their desires, fed them the fantasy they were starving for. She systematically dismantled their marriages, positioning herself as the understanding mistress, the soulmate who understood them better than their cold, ungrateful wives ever had. Once the man was fully compromised, she convinced him to liquidate hard-earned assets, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, property equity. All of it. The men believed they were building a new life with her, funding their escape from a miserable existence. Then she drained the accounts and crossed state lines before the investigations could finalize. The case files were devastating. A doctor in one jurisdiction who lost everything to her, his savings, his clinic, his marriage, and was still making payments on a debt he'd taken out to please her. A real estate developer in another state whose divorce was finalized 2 weeks after the money disappeared, leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back. His attorney had filed 19 motions trying to trace where the funds went. Every single one came back empty. They're all ruined. I said, my voice barely a whisper. They have nothing. Nothing except the shame. Leon said. She leaves them legally and financially broken, with no recourse whatsoever. She picks her victims too well to get burned. Men who are too proud to admit they were conned, too embarrassed to tell the police the whole story. She knows exactly who to target. He paused, letting me understand what he was really saying. And Victor was never the mastermind. He was the mark. So he's not just a cheater. I said, the words coming out slow and heavy. He's the one who got played. The man who paid $35,000 to have me erased was the mark all along. Leon didn't smile. But something flickered behind his eyes, that quiet satisfaction of a puzzle finally snapping into place. The victim of his own arrogance. He said, and I have the receipts to prove it. He turned the laptop toward me, and the screen showed a financial flowchart so dense, it looked like the wiring diagram of a jet engine. Leon had spent the past 8 hours following every single digit of the $250. 0, 0, 0. Victor had drained from our joint accounts, And the picture that emerged was so devastating I had to grip the edge of the desk to stay seated. He clicked on the first node. Victor hadn't parked the money in some secure reserve. He hadn't hidden it in a safety deposit box or a personal account under his own name. Every single dollar had been funneled into a shell corporation registered in Nevada. I stared at the incorporation filing, and the name on the document hit me like a physical blow. The entity was registered under one of Carmen's known aliases. "Look at the transaction descriptions," Leon said, his voice flat and clinical. "Early real estate investments. For their future life together. Their future. My money. My marriage. My home. All of it laundered into a fantasy. Victor was building with a woman who was helping him plan my permanent disappearance, and he was so blinded by greed that he couldn't see what was right in front of him." Leon traced the routing numbers further down the chain. Carmen hadn't left a single dollar in that Nevada account. Within days of each transfer, the funds were swept through a series of offshore holding companies, shell entities registered in jurisdictions, engineered to resist every kind of inquiry. And then came the final layer. She converted the entire $250,000 into untraceable digital currency, splitting it into hundreds of microtransactions that snaked through multiple anonymized wallets before vanishing into thin air. I watched the flowchart resolve into its final shape, and the truth settled into my bones like ice water. Victor thought he was funding my disappearance. He thought every wire transfer brought him one step closer to freedom. The house, the insurance payout, the new life with Carmen. He thought he was the architect of his own liberation, but Carmen didn't care about the house. She didn't care about the insurance money or the deed or any of the things his greedy family was salivating over. She was bleeding him dry in front of his own eyes. And he was too busy playing mastermind to notice. The exit strategy Victor was so proud of wasn't a road to freedom. It was his own federal prison cell, and Carmen had already made sure he was standing right inside it. At 10:47 a.m. on day 3. The living room camera feed flickered to life on Leon's encrypted monitor. I was hunched over the motel desk tracing Carmen's offshore accounts when motion caught my eye and my hand froze. The front door of my own house swung open. No knock. No hesitation. Martha, my mother-in-law, stepped through the threshold, pulling a heavy suitcase behind her. And right behind her came Sheila, my sister-in-law, dragging an even bigger one. They weren't stopping by for a visit. They were moving in. I watched Martha reach into her purse, completely calm, and pull out the spare key. The one Victor and I had given her for emergencies. The one she was supposed to use only if something happened to one of us. She used it like she owned the place. Victor walked out of the kitchen to greet them, a wide smile spreading across his face, the same smile he'd worn while pouring Carmen's wine. Carmen followed close behind, wiping her hands on a dish towel like she'd been cooking in my kitchen for years. Victor took their coats. Carmen handed Martha a glass of red wine, my wine, from my cabinet. They clinked glasses in a casual toast. No awkwardness. No secrecy. No hesitation. Love what you've done with the place, Sheila said. And Carmen actually laughed. Then Sheila looked Carmen up and down. That outfit is gorgeous. Where did you get it? I watched them settle into my sofa like they'd rehearsed the scene 100 times. And that's when the worst reality hit me, not as a suspicion, but as a cold, undeniable certainty. Victor wasn't behaving like a man hiding an affair. He was behaving like a man welcoming his family into his new life. His mother and his sister weren't innocent bystanders who'd been deceived. They knew about the plot. They approved of it. They were active participants in the conspiracy to eliminate me. They were clinking glasses with the woman who was going to watch me disappear. I had already known Victor was guilty. But sitting in that motel room, watching my own in-laws toast to my death, I felt something snap. This wasn't just his betrayal anymore. It was all of theirs. And I wanted all of them to pay. Martha placed her wine glass on the coffee table with a soft clink, and the casual warmth in the room vanished. She reached into her oversized handbag and pulled out a brown leather notebook, the kind an accountant would use to track billable hours. She opened it to a page covered in handwriting so precise it looked printed. Her voice was steady, completely devoid of emotion. Listen carefully. Victor. There will be no mistakes. I pressed my face closer to Leon's monitor. Me pulse hammering. Martha was running this operation like a CEO overseeing a hostile takeover. She told him he had to wait exactly 48 hours after my scheduled arrival in Europe before initiating any official panic. Reporting a missing person too early triggers immediate suspicion. She said. Law enforcement starts digging into the spouse first. You give them nothing to dig into. You wait the full 2 days. You act exactly as heartbroken as you need to be, and not 1 degree more. Then she rehearsed him. Right there in my living room. She made him repeat the words he'd use when the police called the tremor in his voice. The catch in his throat. The exact moment to say, I'm terrified something happened to her. She coached him through it like a director, blocking a scene for opening night. And then came the part that made my skin crawl. Do not call the local precinct. She said. Not first. You contact the United States Department of State directly. Consular affairs. You use these exact phrases. She dictated the language that would classify me as an endangered citizen abroad, the trigger that would bypass local bureaucracy and hand my case to federal investigators. And we had the entire exchange on camera. She emphasized submitting the forged paperwork, the power of attorney, the psychiatric dossier to the embassy investigators, weaponize them at every bureaucratic checkpoint. She said, let the government do the work of declaring her legally dead. Then she outlined the insurance protocol. Notify the company. Request a dedicated claims adjuster. Freeze my individual accounts. Transfer the balances into Victor's checking. And bypass the standard 7-year waiting period for a death certificate. She knew the exact legal loopholes. She had studied them. He sat back, stunned. This wasn't a grieving mother. This was a criminal mastermind assembling a checklist for my legal erasure. My eyes snapped back to the monitor just as Sheila disappeared from the main camera angle. I felt a cold spike of dread and switched the feed to the master bedroom corridor without a second thought. The camera loaded. And there she was, my sister-in-law, standing in the doorway of my private space, holding a yellow steel measuring tape. Not a subtle one. Not a fold-up pocket tape. A contractor's steel tape. The kind that snaps back with a violent hiss. She walked straight into my room like it was a showroom and pulled the tape across the width of the floor. The metal blade scraping against the hardwood as she called out the dimensions to Carmen, who had followed her upstairs with a phone in her hand. 12 by 14. Sheila yelled. Her voice bright and casual. Bigger than I thought. Then she turned to my custom oak wardrobe, the one I'd spent 3 months selecting, and ran her hand along the door. This has to go, she said flatly. We're tearing this out completely. She walked over to the harbor window and studied the natural light pouring through, tilting her head like an appraiser. Good light. Though, she mused, this whole wall could open up. She pointed at my bed. My actual bed. And announced that she'd be replacing it with a larger frame, hers and Carmen's words. Not mine. I watched her pull out her phone and take photos of the kitchen counters next, discussing which marble slab she wanted to order for the upcoming renovation. She was redesigning my house. In real time. While assuming I was dead or locked in some foreign basement. Have you ever watched someone plan a future inside the walls you built? Using the life you earned. As if you were already a footnote, the audacity was so enormous it nearly knocked the breath out of me. I closed that feed with shaking hands. But I kept the frame in my mind. Every square inch of it would become evidence. 6 months later, I sat in that courtroom and watched the final judgment land. Victor was convicted on every single count: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, forgery, and he left in shackles. stripped of the house. The money. The equity he tried to steal. Martha and Sheila avoided prison by cooperating. But they got years of federal probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent stain on their family name. And Carmen. The FBI caught her 3 weeks after she fled. And her aliases connected her to a trail of other ruined men. She'll be locked away for the rest of her life. Walking out of that courthouse, I finally understood the most valuable lesson of this entire nightmare. Greed blinds. It makes you believe you're the predator when you're really the prey. Victor handed over $35,000 to erase me. And he never saw the trap he was building for himself, or the woman draining him dry while he played king. I didn't have to lift a finger in anger. I just gathered the truth and let the law do what it was made to do. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who thought they could erase you, remember, the strongest power doesn't roar. It moves in silence. And it arrives with handcuffs. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes, justice has a way of finding the people who least expect it.